Welcome to the HerbWorks podcast featuring Roger Drummer, the formulator at herbworks.com. An educator in the field of nutrition and Chinese herbalism, Roger has a unique ability to keep things simple by taking all the guesswork out of complicated health issues. HerbWorks is committed to helping you improve your health and enhance your life through herbs and common sense.
Welcome to our HerbWorks podcast. I'm Laura Shakti.
And Roger Drummer.
Today we are talking about protecting our kids. Is that right?
Yep. Brain health for babies and teenagers.
All right. So what are the topics that you want to cover?
Well, we're going to cover just about everything that pertains to your baby's brain health and how that really just moves on through the teen years. So we're going to cover toxicity, low food quality, low nutrient quality, and neurotoxins, all the things that affect a developing baby's brain, a baby's brain in the womb, a teenager, all these different things.
Oh, well, those are quite different things, but very concerning through all of them.
Well, if you learn how to take care of the baby in the womb and the baby as it's developing, it'll be easy to do that when they're teenagers because it's just a progression of learning and a progression of applying the same basic principles.
Okay. So that being said, I guess you have to do you have to tell your audience you are a father of three.
Three. We delivered them all. Well, two of them at home and one in a birthing center. And we were on a certain diet. We paid attention to it the whole time. And we focused on organic food. This is important because I rarely run into anybody that knows this. Remember when we learned in our childbirthing classes that the last 3 months of pregnancy, you have to eat a heavy protein diet.
Yeah, that was the Bradley method that we used for all three
You have to eat a heavy protein diet because the baby's brain, and this is so funny because they use the analogy of a half full gallon jug of water that you throw in the lake. The heavy part sinks down, and the part that's not full kind of bobs at the top of the water. They use that same analogy for how a baby's brain develops. The baby's brain develops mainly in the last 3 months, and in that time, it becomes the heaviest part. So the baby flips. So if you eat a diet that's way too carb-laden and not enough protein, your baby has a greater chance of being
breech.
Of being breech and not turning properly. So
yeah, I remember
that's how much the brain grows in the last 30 days or the last 3 months.
The last trimester,
have to pay attention to adequate protein 3 or 4 times a day and protein snacks because you're building an entire brain.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what that felt like, by the way, building an entire brain and another human being in the last trimester. Any woman out there remembers her last trimester for sure. All right, so let's talk about toxicity.
All right, well, the thing that I always remember about this, and speaking of the baby again in the womb, is that it's really important that the entire pregnancy that you're eating clean food and not being exposed to too many chemicals or toxins, pesticides. So you have to eat organic as often as you can because almost every year the Environmental Working Group puts out a new study where they test the umbilical cords of a score of different babies all over the United States, and they list the amount of known toxins they find, and they check for 300 toxic chemicals. And the last time they ran it, they found 232 on average in a newborn baby's blood.
Wow.
Think about that. A lot of them are endocrine disruptors, meaning they interfere with your hormones. A lot of them are cancer causing. Some of them are neurotoxins. They interfere with your brain development. So if you think about that, just if you're exposed to a neurotoxin, that's say like fluoride, a neurotoxin's definition is that it interferes with how your spinal cord, brain, and nervous system develops. Right? So if you're a mom and you don't know this and you're drinking tap water, in most cities, you're drinking fluoride.
You're drinking a lot more chemicals than maybe you'd like to, right?
And so that type of exposure, you really have to pay attention to and then maximize your diet during pregnancy and the first 3 to 4 years of life because that's when the brain's really growing. It goes from this little gooey thing that just screams, cries, and slobbers
Is that what you would call it?
To this thing that starts talking. Usually with ours, we had one that was talking in short sentences in 9-10 months.
No, that was Sarah. She started talking at 6 months. She was already
she could say words and
she was making us crazy.
Yeah. My oldest daughter asked me where people go when they die when she was 2.5. Right? I think I'm sitting in the car going, oh my God, no. Already? I got to answer this already?
No, she asked us where babies came from when she was just a toddler, like not even 2. Yeah. I think she was about 18 months, and she was asking us how babies come into the world.
Oh, no. Anyway, so with toxins, you have to pay attention. Let's face it, we live in a toxic world. It's everywhere. The chemical companies that spray things on food, pesticides, control so much of our environment, and I mean they're in all phases of the government. We can't get away from it. The only way you can get away from it is policing your own diet, and by making proper food choices, you're basically sending a signal out to the organic food industry what you actually want. And that's why that industry is growing and growing and growing, because the more people become aware of food, the more they want clean food. And this is really important, especially in the womb and then at the whole stage of life.
Okay. And then what about food quality?
Well, that, you have to pay attention to is you can't be eating fast food all the time.
Why?
I mean, it's tempting probably when you're pregnant, you get cravings for things to eat fast food because there's very little nutrient levels in it. It's usually toxic. You're never going to find fast food that's organic. So you're going to have a lot of chemicals in it. Look at all the lawsuits in the last 2 or 3 years against different fast food chains. One of them was being sued for calling their beef because it only had 50% beef in it. Wow. Do you really want to buy something that you really want to eat beef that's 50% beef?
Is the best cardboard?
Yeah, well, they had sawdust in it. They had all kinds of chemical stuff in it. Who wants to eat that? You can't tell me that that's going to be nutritious. And you can't tell me that that doesn't have a lot of other chemical additives to make it taste good. So the less chemical, the less pesticide, the less toxic exposure, then the better off for your child. Because remember, it's forming its nervous system, right? And this is where, if you notice, they're now adding DHA to baby formula, baby milk. They're adding it to, they're suggesting that DHA is the beneficial fat in fish that helps your brain grow.
Isn't it also just naturally occurring in breast milk?
Only if you have a diet that has it.
If you have a rich diet.
If you have a rich diet in it. So DHA, you have to get in your diet. The problem with that is that now they show there's new studies out that if you even ate fish twice a week as a pregnant mother, your mercury levels exceed the safe limits for mercury. In other words, it exceeds the level by which mercury could make a difference in the IQ of your child. Probably the least exciting fish to eat in the world is a sardine, but it's the safest. It has the least amount of toxins in it and probably the most omega-3s. And that's because they're little bitty fishes that don't eat other fishes.
Little bitty fishes.
When you eat a tuna is a huge, or a swordfish, it's a huge fish that eats other fish that have mercury in them, and it concentrates in them.
So you want to eat the fish that eat plankton or eat plants or that are not eating other animals?
Probably the lowest toxic fish is the sardines. And they also, though, list all wild fish from Alaska. Seems to be farther down the chain.
Interesting.
They're pretty clean. And so, things like salmon. But the reality is, if you really want to get DHA, you should probably just supplement with fish oil. Because that's all tested and it's all purified. You're going to get the amount of DHA you want every day, and it's easier during pregnancy.
Now, we give our kids fish oil, and there's some brands that you don't, quote, burp up, as what some of the kids say, and there's some that digest easier, right?
Right, there are, and that just has to do with how well they actually process it, whether it's distilled properly. I always thought it had to do with whether it rancid or not, but I guess it's the distilling process. Although caps, you want to buy a brand that sells a lot because you don't want it sitting around a long time. But I buy my kids Barleans, and no one's ever complained about it. never has a problem with it. And by the way, if I mention a product on this, no one's paying us to do it.
We
too,
wish.
We're
We
too
wish.
small at the moment, and we're not getting paid for anything. So I'm just basically plugging something I give my kids. So
That's
Bartleans is what I give them. But that's the thing you have to pay attention to, because when you eat low quality food, there's nothing in it that your body actually uses to make anything. And so that's really important, especially during pregnancy, because during pregnancy, if you don't meet certain requirements, your body's pulling nutrition out of the mother all the time. That's why they become calcium deficient. That's why their
people
bones
used to lose teeth.
their teeth
Yeah.
get weak, their bones get weak, all this, because if you don't supply your developing child and yourself with a high level of nutrition, it's all just going to come out of you.
Yeah, I remember when with each of the kids, I had specific cravings for each of them. It wasn't the same at all, but it was never fast food or anything like that. But most interestingly, it was some kind of food from my childhood in Europe that you just don't get here in America very easily. So I know that your body is telling you something when it's craving
deficient in something. I remember you had a craving for beef, and we were vegetarians, so I think you had beef once and then never ate it again. You just never.
Which kid was that? I didn't remember that.
I think that was the first one. Yeah.
Was that Sarah?
Yeah.
Huh.
Had a craving for beef. So you should never lose focus of the fact that you're creating a human being. It doesn't just happen at conception. It's the whole process, every single moment, every single day.
Well, I remember once I read somewhere when I was pregnant that when you are building a baby, when you're pregnant, you are expending the same amount of energy every day. I think it's especially that first trimester, as if you were climbing a mountain. So if you think about going through your every day, you go to work, you work out, you clean the house, you cook, you do whatever, you're driving the other kids around. But you're also spending as much energy as if you had gone on a whopping hike, like a 4 or 5 hour hike.
Is that climbing a mountain while throwing up every day?
Oh, you remember that, huh?
So all these things make a difference. So you have to pay attention to really good quality food.
All right. So what is the difference between buying what you think is good food in the grocery store? You go to any grocery store and this is on sale, that's on sale. And you think, well, it's fruits, it's vegetables. That looks good to me, versus organic food.
Well, the difference is that organic food is going to have the least amount of artificial chemicals sprayed on it.
And what about the nutrient
Pesticides.
Quality itself?
Nutrient quality is different too. I had the opportunity clear back in the it was the late 80s, mid 80s, to work for an organic farmer in Sedona, Arizona. He was the only farm in Sedona, right? And it was only an acre or so down in this little valley, but he grew an incredible amount of fruit and vegetables. And he was one of those real back to earth nuts that he grew all kinds of different crops just to till them into the soil so the soil would have something in it.
Re-energize
and he
the
had
soil,
a private garden next to his house where he grew exotic plants from around the world to eat, that he dug down 6 or 7 feet and layered it with seaweeds and all kinds of stuff.
He was very
to grow.
creative.
But the one thing I learned from him, which was the thing I never forgot, was he said, if you take a head of broccoli that's organically grown and they send it to a lab, you'll get at least 88 nutrients will be tested out in it. If you send one from a conventional farm that's been doing it for a long time, you'll get 12 or 13 nutrients. And they only put in the soil the ones that'll make it grow big and look green.
Right.
And so that's the difference in eating it, because you're getting a whole different level of trace minerals, and that plant will have a different energy to it and a different quality of feeding your body. And so I've never forgot that lesson from him. You have to eat well, but you also have to supplement. Just like with the DHA, there's just certain nutrients you have to have or the baby's brain's not going to develop. And these same nutrients you're going to need throughout the whole kids' development and through their teen years and hopefully most of the time through their whole life. You have to just pay attention to it because there's just certain things you don't get out of the food. There's, the government recognized this. How many decades ago, I don't know exactly when it was, they put folic acid into the food supply, hoping to slow down spina bifida, muscular dystrophy, all those things. And I guess they had a significant effect of cutting down on half of it, right? So there was a change of somewhat, becoming aware of this. This is why doctors tell you to take folic acid. But the problem I have with that, I just have to mention this, is that we now know, maybe this wasn't a statistics then, but we now know that half the people in the country have a problem with their genetics and they don't absorb folic acid. So they don't actually take it into their body and use it to heal and develop their nervous system. So they're just deficient in it all the time.
Well, how do you find that out and what do you do about it?
Well, you can find it out by doing a DNA test and testing specifically for that, but it's a lot easier just to take some methylated folic acid.
You can't overdose on it then?
You can. It's a B vitamin. You're not going to overdose on it.
You pee it out, yeah.
Yeah, B vitamins. And you should take a methylated B12 too, because so many people have digestive issues, and it takes having the right microbiome to make what they call intrinsic factor, which is needed to make B12, that you should just supplement with it. But again, methylated B12. And it's just as important for adults today as it is for the mother, right? And this is the thing, this is the beef I have with folic acid, is that if 50% of the country does not absorb folic acid in the form that it's in the food supply, why aren't doctors, when they recommend folic acid, making sure the women are taking methylated folic acid?
Do you think that's just a gap in education between
I think it's
research
a gap
and the
in
medical
education.
world?
I don't think that medical industry pays that much attention to nutrition. There should be some movement to just educate people about that, because here's the problem with folic acid. All the stuff that they're putting in the food supply is synthetic. It has to be converted into an active form by your liver. If you don't have the genes to do that, you don't do it.
I didn't know you were so riled up about this folic acid business.
Well, I am, because, when I had cancer, I found out that I wasn't methylating Bs properly, and it might have added to my whole outcome of why I got it. And if you don't methylate Bs, besides brain development and nervous system, it plays a huge role in how your body makes glutathione and uses it, which is the main antioxidant that protects you. And it plays a huge role in protecting your DNA from damage. And so when you look at the type of cancer I had and you drag it back to origins, it has to do with methylation issues in the liver and the bladder, which all are about the food you ate. But I had all the food things covered. There was something else I was missing. I probably wasn't getting exact amounts of certain things, and that
because you
had
some genetic
and
issue
that
with
added
it.
I don't have the gene that prevents me from absorbing it, but I have some problems with it anyway. And so it's a big issue.
How can people protect their unborn child or their newborns or their growing children, their teenagers?
Well, if you're listening to this podcast and you have kids that are going to be growing up and having kids of their own, make sure that they're aware of getting methylated folic acid when they get married or when they're in a relationship, so that they have a baby, it's available. You want to look at basic issues. You want to look at having a B vitamin or a multivitamin, not real heavy in anything, but you have to have basic methylated folic acid, B12. You want to have DHA. You want to cover those bases. And there's a lot of talk around, I don't think this has been proven, that taking adequate amounts of DHA in your pregnancy can actually improve the IQ of your baby. Now, they only claim 5 points, but hey, 5 points is 5 points. From my point of view, I can see where it makes a difference, because when you look at how much of the brain and how is made up of things that nerves and nerve tissue that needs DHA and all the different nutrients in fish oil, choline and all these different things to produce and to be healthy, then it only makes sense that you're going to be growing a much healthier brain if it's starting out with all the things it needs to make that.
Yeah.
If you're starting out completely deficient, how are you going to build something really great. It's use the analogy of building a house out of straw or a house out of bricks, right?
I think in our case, we built a house out of greens. My goodness, the amount of dark leafy greens that I ate through all 3 pregnancies.
Well, that's because greens, those are the foods that actually help with the methylation process so that your body makes more glutathione and has all the nutrients there so that, there's a lot of folate in these greens. You have to pay attention to if, once the kid's born and you just have to, there's nothing wrong with supplementing with a children's vitamin that has B vitamins in it and different nutrients. They're going to need that because of the type of things they're going to be exposed to their whole life. So just get into a habit of giving them something as they grow up because it makes a huge difference. Look at that study that was just in the Wall Street Journal. There was an article called This Food May Cure Your Depression. In the Wall Street Journal, they had an article about how if you went in to get an antidepressant and you had been there and you told your story and the doctor prescribed something to you, there was probably a question that no one ever asked you, and that is, what kind of food are you eating? And what they noticed in all these studies that have been coming out the last decade, that when they took the people that were either depressed, had been depressed for a long time, or just starting to think they needed an antidepressant, and changed their diet to one of just whole foods, and they didn't say anything real specific. It said fish once in a while, lean red meat, lots of vegetables, whole grains, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a normal, whole,
a lot of people were
diet.
able to not even need antidepressants. Some were able to get off of antidepressants. And it said that it worked just as well with teenagers as it did with anybody else. And so if you think about the fact that the modern teenager today consumes 25% of their calories from sugar, you can see where that type of diet would have made a huge difference in their brain health, especially when they're starting to move into their teen years and their hormones are changing and all these things are going on. Just to have a diet where they're growing up healthy and not have high levels of all these neurotoxins and endocrine disrupting chemicals in their diet every single day when they're going through puberty makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Now, talk to me for a minute about your experience with adaptogenic herbs. You are a herbalist, Chinese herbology, a nutritionist, formulator. What can people do with adaptogenic herbs for supplementing during pregnancy? Are there some things they shouldn't take, some things they should?
Well, there isn't anything that I know that's been listed as harmful during pregnancy. The thing with herbs in pregnancy is that in the first trimester, you don't want to do anything.
Well, I could barely get anything down the
if
first
If you're going to do
trimester.
anything during that time, it's maybe ginger tea. It's something that settles your stomach. Ginger tea, that's what it's actually for, is it helps with flatulence, it helps with gas, it helps with any type of stomach upset, nausea, all these different things. And so that's the perfect herb for that. But after that, you move into what they call chi tonics and things that are considered to be Jing tonics, which is something that replenishes your reproductive system. So a lot of adaptogenic herbs fall into that category. They're especially of the Jing tonics because they help your adrenal kidney energy, which is like the battery pack that runs your reproductive system, keeps it from going weak. So having some anti-stress herbs during pregnancy would be really good. You want to have herbs that are actually calming, but if they're low energy, you can get a chi tonic, things that help you not only with your physical energy, but also help you to build blood, help you to actually, just get through the physical aspects of whatever's going on.
So are the products that you have on the market, Tianchi, Inner Peace, Sleep and Recover, are those something that women can take during pregnancy without worry?
I would not recommend Tianchi during pregnancy.
Why?
Because Tianchi is a very heavy formula, meaning that there's a lot in it. And so
a lot of nutrients.
A lot of nutrients, a lot of herbs. It's a big formula, right? Just going by the same theory as with pregnancy, you're not supposed to be juicing. You're not supposed to make these vegetable juices and drink a lot of
It's just too much at one time for your liver to
it'll
process.
move your your liver will dump too many toxins. All that ends up in your bloodstream and the umbilical cord. You don't want to move that much stuff. You want to have a gentler diet. All your good food should just be in food form. But there's no problem taking inner peace if you're stressed out. A lot of people are extremely stressed when they're pregnant. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
What about the sleep one, sleep and recover?
That I don't know so much about. I don't think there's anything harmful in it. I haven't researched it for pregnancy. On every one of our products it says not to be used by anybody that if you're pregnant or have a medical condition, you have to consult.
Right. It's
a
by
doctor.
law what you have to put on there.
It's by law what you have to put on there. It's the same way with Tianqi and kids. People always ask me, can I give Tianqi to my kid? And I basically have the same response all the time. I give it to my kids. My kids like it. One of them drinks it in a milkshake before school, and the other one just likes it plain or with almond milk.
That being saying, our kids are teenagers.
Our kids are teenagers, and they don't do it every day, but they do it several times a week. They like it, especially for test days, and there's nothing in it harmful to them, but you just, by law, can't recommend things to kids. But they're my kids, so I do whatever I want. And so, but the fact is that it's amazing to me that I'll get phone calls about, is this harmful to my kid? I'm thinking about putting them on 2 or 3 pharmaceutical drugs for a different condition. And I really can't say anything about that because I'm not allowed to give medical advice. But it's very fascinating to me that they're trying to decide between nutrition and mind-altering drugs.
All right, so to summarize, what would you say, what advice would you give to either couples that are thinking about having children or people who have just started their family that are now learning about nutrition, herbs, supplements? What's the best advice that you can give to people?
Well, if you haven't started your family yet and you're not pregnant, I would say wait at least 3 months. Clean up your diet for 3 months. It makes a huge difference in the amount of chemicals in your system. You'd be surprised just by eating clean food for 3 months, how your whole body's completely different. And I would also suggest that they buy a water system because it's the main source of the number one neurotoxin, really, is fluoride, is through the water system, especially if you live near a city. So buying something that gets some of that out is just huge for you, right? And then if you already have children, you want to just pay attention to, again, the same things with pregnancy, eating organic food, supplementing on some regular basis. It doesn't have, and supplements for kids don't have to be expensive. They don't need that much, right? If you take out the toxic part of their diet and put in whole foods and organic foods, then the amount of nutrition they require is less. But I still would make sure that they got a dose of DHA every single day because that's so important to the developing brain. Think about how, there's a lot of argument about this, but it's kind of a known fact with autism. What happens? They seem to be normal until 16, 18 months, which is a major part of brain development. And then something happens. And so the argument is that it's exposure to something, and it's probably a lack of something. It's probably the combined effect of a lot of different things.
Like no one knows yet.
But everybody knows that the brain is developing like crazy in those first few months, and it doesn't stop developing. You ever think about this? People don't think about this, but it's a great example. You can't rent a car unless you're 25 years old.
Yes, we do know that.
Do you know why that is? Because the insurance companies did research on brain function, and they realized the part of your brain that allows you to reason doesn't develop until you're at least 21. And so if you're in a car with other people that are influencing your behavior, there's a great chance that you won't be able to say no to them no matter what they're suggesting that you do. And so you can't rent a car unless you're 25 because they want to make sure the reasoning part of your brain has developed before they're going to give you the keys to a car that they own.
Do you hear that, parents?
So think about that in relation to development of the brain. This is by 21. We're talking right here with kids. Babies up to 3 years is a massive brain growth period. And then teenagers going through all this hormone fluctuation. There's just periods of great intense brain activity. Why not feed it like it's a race car, like it's a high performance engine, and give it the best things you can possibly give it?
Well, this has been a very informative conversation about protecting our kids, something we were both very passionate about with our 3 children. And can't wait for the next podcast. This is Laura Shakti.
And Roger Drummer. Thanks for listening to the HerbWorks podcast. And if you want more information, go to herbworks.com.